No one stayed until the human found her, broken but breathing, and refused to leave. The human ship touched down on the dusty surface of the abandoned colony with a soft tremor. The engines hummed as they powered down, leaving an eerie silence that seemed heavier than the thin air around him. He stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the powdery soil, and scanned the horizon. Buildings once tall and proud now leaned at odd angles. Some crumbled entirely, leaving jagged metal and stone strewn across empty streets. Smoke curled faintly from a few places, evidence of recent fires, but there was no sound of life. No footsteps, no shouts, not even the whisper of wind through broken windows. He tightened the straps of his backpack, checking his equipment one more time. His name did not matter here, not yet. All that mattered was the faint distress signal he had received, weak but steady, and the feeling in his gut that someone, something, was still alive. He moved carefully, each step making a small cloud of dust rise around his ankles. His eyes swept over the ruins, noting where structures had collapsed, where streets had cracked, and where the signs of a struggle were obvious. Scorched scorch marks on walls, broken vehicles abandoned mid-drive, and scorch marks that suggested the weapons used were unlike anything he had seen before. The silence pressed on him, a weight heavier than the gravity of the planet. He could feel it in his chest, a mix of anticipation and unease. He was not afraid, not in the way some humans would be, but he knew the risk of entering this desolate place alone. His hand rested on the side of his utility belt where his small plasma tool rested. It was not a weapon, not yet, but he could use it if necessary. The last human settlement he had visited on another planet had ended badly when he had underestimated the alien wildlife. This time, he would be cautious. As he entered what had once been a central square, he noticed a broken statue at the center. Its head had been knocked off, lying several meters away, half buried in dust. He crouched, brushing the grime away, and saw faint claw marks along the base. Something had been here recently. He paused, listening intently. There it was, a faint rhythm barely perceptible beneath the creaking of the damaged buildings, a shallow, uneven breathing. The human followed the sound, stepping over debris and careful to leave no trace of his presence. The breathing grew louder as he neared a collapsed tower on the edge of the square. Pieces of metal and stone had fallen in a chaotic heap, leaving a small space beneath the rubble. He crouched low, careful not to make noise, and peered into the darkness. There she was. Her body was twisted beneath the debris, one arm pinned awkwardly, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Her skin had a pale blue tint, almost luminescent in the dim light, and her eyes fluttered weakly open when she sensed movement. She was alive, but barely. The human swallowed, his instincts screaming at him to act quickly. He moved closer, crouching beside her. "I'm here to help," he said softly. His voice was calm but firm, filled with a warmth that seemed foreign in this cold, abandoned place. She looked at him, her eyes wide, fear mingling with confusion. He could see the faint scars along her arms and the faint smear of blood across her forehead. Her species had markings, elegant patterns etched into their skin naturally, but the injuries disrupted them. He reached out carefully, gauging her reaction. She flinched, pulling slightly against her restraints, but did not try to escape. "Don't worry, I won't leave you," he said. He scanned the area quickly. The rubble was unstable, but there were enough large stones and metal pieces to give him leverage. Using his strength and tools, he began shifting debris carefully. Small rocks clattered to the ground, dust filling the air, but he worked methodically, talking to her all the while. "Almost there, just a little more." When enough space had cleared, he slid his arm beneath her, careful not to worsen her injuries. She hissed softly at the movement, but made no attempt to resist. Step by step, he lifted her from under the rubble, feeling her slight weight against him. She was fragile, almost weightless, yet she had an undeniable strength in the way her body resisted complete collapse. The human adjusted his hold, using his backpack straps to secure her gently against his chest. Once she was free, he lowered her to the ground gently, sitting back on his heels. He opened a first aid kit and worked quickly, cleaning cuts and applying temporary bandages. She watched him quietly, her eyes tracking his movements with a mix of suspicion and relief. She could not speak his language yet, but her gestures were enough for him to understand that she was trying to communicate something: fear, gratitude, warning. A distant rumble interrupted them, the ground trembling slightly. He looked up to see cracks spreading along the nearby buildings, dust clouds rising. The planet itself seemed unstable. "We need to move," he said. He gently lifted her again, adjusting the hold. "I'll keep you safe." He navigated the streets carefully, noting the dangers at every step. Collapsed energy lines sparked occasionally, creating dangerous arcs of electricity. Broken vehicles and debris blocked paths, forcing him to find alternate routes. Through it all, he kept her close, whispering softly when she flinched at the noise. His determination was absolute. He would not leave her behind, no matter the risk. Hours passed as he moved through the city. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruins. He found temporary shelter in what had once been a small library, its walls cracked but still standing. Inside, he placed her on a makeshift bed of metal panels and cloth he found among the debris. She shivered slightly, exhausted from the effort of staying alive. He built a small fire using an energy pack and carefully monitored its heat. "You need to rest," he said, sitting nearby. She looked at him, blinking slowly, as if trying to understand why he cared so much. His presence seemed to reassure her, a strange comfort in a world that had abandoned her. Through the night, he stayed alert, listening to the creaks of the buildings and the occasional distant sound that hinted at danger. He thought about how many others might have tried to help but turned away, leaving her alone. He did not understand why she had been abandoned, but he knew one thing clearly: he would not do the same. Morning light filtered through broken windows, and he prepared to move again. She stirred, her body slowly responding to the warmth and care he had given. Her eyes met his, and for the first time she reached out a tentative hand. He took it, squeezing gently, a silent promise that she was not alone. As they stepped outside, he scanned the horizon. The ruins stretched endlessly, but he could see signs of life, small alien creatures moving cautiously among the wreckage. He knew their journey would be dangerous, that the planet itself seemed hostile, yet his resolve remained firm. He would not leave her. Not now, not ever. Together they moved forward, a fragile team in a world that had tried to break them both. Each step was careful, each movement measured, but there was hope in their unity. She could not speak his language yet, but her presence was enough to awaken something deep within him. A sense of purpose, a commitment to protect, and a belief that even in the darkest places, humanity could shine. He did not know what lay ahead. He did not know if they would survive the day or the next, or if the planet itself would try to claim them. But he knew this. He had found her, broken but breathing, and he would refuse to leave. That simple act of choice, that determination, was already a spark of light in a world consumed by shadows. And so the human and the alien survivor moved together, step by step, toward an uncertain future, yet guided by an unshakable truth. No one deserved to be left behind, and some bonds were strong enough to defy even the most abandoned worlds. The morning air was thin and dry as the human and the alien survivor moved cautiously through the ruins. The human had learned her pace, slow, careful, each step measured. She leaned slightly on him, her trust growing, though still tentative. The sun rose higher, painting the broken city in shades of red and gold, highlighting the damage that had left it lifeless. Dust floated through the streets in faint beams of light, as if the world itself had paused and waited for something to happen. He scanned the area continuously. Even as she rested against him, he noticed details others might miss: a cracked wall ready to fall, a faint vibration beneath the ground, a glimmer of movement in the distance. The city was quiet, but quiet meant danger here. Some predators or scavengers could be hiding, waiting to take advantage of the abandoned streets. He tightened his grip on her arm gently, giving her reassurance. She looked up at him, her pale blue eyes wide, and for the first time made a small sound, a word perhaps, though he could not understand it. She repeated it softly, almost like she was testing whether he could respond. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "I don't understand yet," he said, "but I will." His voice carried calm determination, and she seemed to relax slightly. The ruins led them to a wider street where the remnants of the city's transportation system lay twisted and broken. Vehicles with shattered glass and exposed circuits sat scattered like skeletons. He paused, carefully stepping over debris, watching the ground for danger. She mimicked his movements, her balance unsteady but improving with every step. A sudden sound made him freeze, a soft hiss like wind through a broken pipe. He turned sharply, scanning for the source. The alien's eyes widened and she pressed herself closer to him. He held up a hand to signal her to stay quiet. The hiss came again, louder this time, and he realized it was not wind. It was machinery, possibly left behind as a trap or an automated defense system. He guided her behind a toppled wall and crouched low, whispering instructions. "Stay close. Don't move too fast." She nodded, her expression tense but trusting. He peered over the wall, observing a small patrol of automated drones moving in an uneven pattern. Their purpose was unclear, but they were dangerous enough that a direct confrontation could have disastrous results. He waited for a gap, timing their movement carefully. When the drones shifted, he led her forward, low to the ground, keeping her shadowed by rubble. They moved slowly, each step calculated, until they reached a narrow alley where the drones could not follow. She exhaled softly, a sound that was almost relief, and looked up at him. He offered a small smile, a gesture of encouragement, and she responded with a faint nod. They continued through the city, navigating streets filled with the remnants of life that had once thrived there. Shops with shattered windows displayed broken merchandise, parks were overgrown with alien plants, and bridges crumbled into the void below. He noted every obstacle, every potential hiding place, keeping her safe. As the day passed, she began to communicate more. Small gestures, pointing to objects or using hand movements, became clearer to him. She showed him how her people used certain tools, even in their weakened state, and he watched closely, learning quickly. The simplicity of her instructions amazed him. Their design was elegant, functional, and efficient. He marveled at her intelligence, and she seemed pleased when he followed her guidance successfully. At one point, they reached a wide square with a broken fountain in the center. Water had long since dried up, leaving only the cracked stone and moss growing along the edges. He set her down gently, letting her rest while he inspected the area. She watched him closely, her trust in him growing. Her breathing was steadier now, her body less rigid with fear. He knelt beside her, opening a small container with water he had purified from his supplies. He held it to her lips, and she drank slowly, eyes never leaving his. He noticed the faintest flicker of a smile on her face, a small victory in a world that had offered her little kindness. He allowed himself a brief moment of relief, knowing that her survival was now more likely because of his efforts. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the ruined city. He knew they could not stay in the open. He searched for shelter, finally spotting a building partially intact at the edge of the square. The walls were cracked, but the roof held, and inside there was enough room for them to rest without being exposed. He helped her inside, moving carefully over broken floor tiles. She followed, stumbling slightly, but he caught her in time. Inside, he built a small fire using his energy pack, careful to keep the heat low to avoid attracting attention. She watched him, her eyes reflecting the glow. For the first time, she seemed almost relaxed, sitting cross-legged and observing him work. He prepared a simple meal from his supplies, sharing it with her. She ate slowly, almost cautiously, but he could see the small movements of appreciation in her gestures. As night fell, he remained vigilant. He listened to every sound, noting the creaks and groans of the damaged building, the occasional distant noise outside. He spoke softly to her, telling her stories of other planets he had visited, of humans he had known, and of his belief that no one should be left behind. She listened quietly, her gaze fixed on him, absorbing not just the words but the tone, the calm, steady assurance that she was safe. They slept in shifts. When he rested, he kept one eye open, listening for danger. She rested more fully, her body slowly recovering. He watched her sleep for a moment, noting the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the flicker of expression on her face. He felt a deep responsibility, not just for her life, but for her trust, for the bond that had begun to form between them. The next day brought new challenges. The city was more treacherous than he had first thought. Streets had collapsed into deep chasms, and unstable structures threatened to fall at any moment. Yet he moved forward with determination, guiding her carefully, teaching her how to navigate safely. She followed his lead, her confidence growing with each step. At one point, they came across a fallen transport vessel, half buried in rubble. Its interior was dark, but he could see signs of life, small alien creatures scavenging, cautious but curious. He motioned for her to stay back while he investigated. The creatures noticed him, but instead of attacking, they retreated, moving quickly and quietly. He understood then that even in this ruined world, life found ways to survive. He returned to her, and together they continued, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. As the day drew to a close, they reached a vantage point overlooking the city. The ruins stretched endlessly, a tapestry of destruction and survival. He helped her climb to a safe spot, and they looked out together. She pointed to distant shapes moving across the horizon, remnants of the conflict that had left her world abandoned. He followed her gesture, noting the threats but also the possibilities. She turned to him, her expression more open now. He could see gratitude, relief, and something deeper, trust that had taken root. He smiled gently, reaching out to touch her hand. She did not pull away. Instead, she allowed it, her fingers brushing against his in a simple, human gesture of connection. In that moment, he knew that their journey together had begun in earnest, not just as rescuer and rescued, but as companions facing an uncertain world. Night fell again, and they found a new shelter, more secure this time, deeper within a partially intact structure. He set up protective barriers using his equipment, ensuring they would be safe until morning. She rested nearby, her body finally allowing itself to relax fully. He sat close, maintaining vigilance, yet feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. They were no longer alone. In a world that had abandoned her, he had chosen to stay. In a place filled with danger and uncertainty, he had refused to leave. The bond between them was fragile, yet strong, built on trust, survival, and the simple, unspoken understanding that they needed each other. As the stars appeared above, faint through the broken roof, he looked down at her sleeping form and made a silent promise. No matter what dangers lay ahead, no matter the challenges, he would not abandon her. He would protect her, guide her, and ensure that she survived. The human spirit, he knew, was defined not just by courage, but by the choice to care, even when no one else would. And so they slept, side by side in the quiet ruins, ready to face whatever the next day would bring. The world around them was broken, but together they found strength. The human had found her, broken but breathing, and had refused to leave. That choice would shape everything to come. The morning sun had barely risen when the human helped her from their temporary shelter. Her body was stronger now, the injuries slowly healing, but she still leaned on him for support. The ruins around them were quiet, yet every shadow and broken wall suggested danger could appear at any moment. He moved carefully, scanning every corner, every roofline, every alley. Even in the quiet, he felt the tension of the abandoned city pressing against them. They made their way through the streets, moving cautiously. She followed his lead, learning quickly how to avoid hazards he pointed out. Sharp metal edges, weakened floors, and unstable walls became part of their shared awareness. Her eyes began to scan their surroundings on her own, mimicking the careful, deliberate movements of the human. She did not yet speak his language, but their actions were a silent conversation, a shared rhythm born of necessity and trust. He noticed signs that others had recently passed through the city, footprints in the dust, marks on walls, and even small caches of supplies abandoned in haste. Someone had been here, and the thought made him more alert. They could not afford to be caught unaware. He adjusted the pack he carried, making sure she had what she needed for the journey ahead. Every movement was deliberate, every decision carefully considered. As they moved through a particularly damaged district, the human spotted something unusual, a faint glimmer of light reflecting off broken glass. He signaled for her to stay close and approached carefully. The light came from a small device partially buried in rubble, a remnant of the city's technology. He examined it, recognizing it as an old communication beacon. Even though it was damaged, he could see it had some residual energy. "This might help us," he said softly, showing her the device. She leaned closer, eyes wide with curiosity. She reached out with a delicate hand, tracing the edges of the device, and he watched with admiration at the care in her movements. He realized that even in her weakened state, her curiosity and intelligence were remarkable. They continued their journey, moving slowly toward the outskirts of the city. The buildings grew less dense, and the terrain began to slope downward into rocky hills and jagged cliffs. The air was thinner here, cooler, carrying the faint scent of minerals and dust. The human helped her step over rocks and uneven ground, her small hand gripping his arm tightly when the slope became steep. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hills, and the ground trembled beneath them. He froze, scanning the surrounding area. Dust and small stones rained down from a nearby cliff, disturbed by some unseen movement. She instinctively pressed herself against him, her body tense. The human assessed the situation quickly. It was not natural, this was something moving with purpose. He led her to cover behind a large boulder crouching low. From their hiding place, they saw a group of scavengers moving through the hills. They were humanoid but heavily armored, carrying advanced tools that looked dangerous. The human realized immediately that they were searching for survivors, likely including her. Their movements were precise and coordinated, suggesting experience and intent. "We need to stay hidden," he whispered, keeping his voice low. She nodded, understanding the urgency even without words. He watched the scavengers carefully, noting their patterns and timing. They could not fight them directly, it would be suicide. Instead, they waited for the right moment, silent and still, until the group moved past. Once the scavengers had gone, they resumed their journey, moving even more cautiously. The human guided her through narrow paths, over rocky terrain, and across shallow streams that crisscrossed the landscape. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. She followed closely, her trust in him growing with every successful evasion. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon. The walls rose high on either side, casting long shadows that hid their movements. They followed the canyon carefully, knowing it could be a trap, but also realizing it offered cover from aerial threats. She moved more confidently now, her pace steadier, and he encouraged her with small gestures and words of reassurance. Halfway through the canyon, they encountered a collapsed bridge. A deep chasm stretched below, and there was no clear way across. He knelt, examining the remnants of the bridge, and realized they could use the metal beams to create a makeshift path. She watched him, her eyes bright with curiosity and cautious excitement. Working together, they shifted beams and rubble, testing each piece before stepping on it. Her hands trembled slightly, but she followed his instructions carefully. He offered guidance and encouragement, and step by step, they crossed the chasm. When they reached the other side, she exhaled softly, a sound that seemed to carry relief, gratitude, and trust all at once. The canyon opened into a wide valley, dotted with alien vegetation. Strange, bioluminescent plants glowed faintly even in the daylight, casting eerie colors across the terrain. The human marveled at the beauty, despite the danger that still surrounded them. She paused to examine the plants, touching them gently with curiosity. He watched her closely, noting her fascination, and realized that even in a world broken by conflict, life still found ways to flourish. They set up a brief rest in the shade of a large rock formation. He shared some water with her, and she drank carefully, her eyes flicking toward him in silent acknowledgement. He spoke softly, telling her stories of other places he had seen, of distant worlds, and of human resilience. She listened quietly, her gaze fixed on him, absorbing the sounds and rhythms of his voice. As the afternoon passed, they resumed their journey across the valley. The terrain became more rugged, with steep slopes and sharp rocks that tested their endurance. She struggled at times, but he remained patient, offering steady support and encouragement. He taught her how to use her body to balance and step carefully, and she began to follow his lead with increasing confidence. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed across the valley. Both froze, scanning the area. From behind a ridge, a massive creature emerged, moving with speed and power. Its skin was armored, glinting in the sunlight, and its eyes fixed on them. The human instinctively stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. He could see the creature was curious, perhaps territorial, but it posed a clear threat. He guided her behind a cluster of rocks, keeping her low. He studied the creature carefully, noting its movements and patterns. It seemed to be testing them, unsure whether they were prey, threat, or something else. The human realized they needed to move carefully to avoid provoking it. He whispered instructions, and she followed without hesitation, trusting his judgment completely. Step by step, they moved across the valley, keeping low and using the terrain for cover. The creature followed at a distance, its movements deliberate but not immediately aggressive. He led her to a narrow gorge that the creature could not easily enter, providing them a temporary reprieve. She exhaled quietly, pressing herself against him in relief. They continued through the gorge, emerging into a forested area filled with alien trees and thick undergrowth. The light here was dimmer, filtered through the dense canopy. Strange sounds echoed around them, calls of unknown creatures, rustling leaves, and the distant flow of water. The human guided her carefully, keeping her close and observing their surroundings for any signs of danger. As night approached, they found a safe clearing. He built a small, contained fire using his equipment, careful not to draw attention. She watched him, her expression reflecting both awe and curiosity. He offered her a small meal, and she ate slowly, her body recovering from the long day of travel. He noticed her gaze linger on him, and he realized the bond between them had deepened. They rested side by side, taking turns keeping watch. The forest was alive with sounds, some threatening, others simply the pulse of life continuing despite the destruction around them. She leaned against him at times, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility and connection. He knew the journey ahead would be even more challenging, but he also knew that together they had a chance to survive. Throughout the night, he kept one eye open, listening to the forest and the faint sounds of movement. She slept more soundly now, her body allowing itself to relax. He reflected on the choices that had brought them here, his refusal to leave her when she was broken, and her trust in him despite her fear. That simple decision had created a bond stronger than either had expected. By the first light of morning, they were ready to continue. The human helped her to her feet, adjusting her pack and offering encouragement. She moved with more confidence now, her trust in him complete. They stepped into the forest together, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead, knowing that their strength came not just from survival, but from the bond that had grown between them. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, they moved forward not just as survivor and rescuer, but as companions in a dangerous world. Every step carried the promise of hope, every breath was a testament to resilience, and every choice reinforced the truth that humanity, even in a broken and abandoned place, could shine. The human and the alien survivor moved cautiously through the forest, their senses alert to every sound and movement. The forest was alive with strange creatures, some harmless, some potentially dangerous. He guided her carefully, keeping her close, explaining silently when to step lightly or pause. She followed his lead, her trust complete, her small hand occasionally brushing against his arm for balance. The bond between them had grown strong, a silent agreement that they would protect each other no matter what. The path ahead was not easy. Fallen trees blocked their way, and thick vines threatened to slow their progress. He used a small cutting tool to clear obstacles while showing her how to navigate safely. Her movements were becoming more confident, yet she still leaned on him when the terrain became steep or unstable. Each step was deliberate, careful, and filled with the shared understanding that any mistake could be dangerous. As they moved deeper into the forest, they began to notice signs that they were not alone. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, and faint tracks in the soil suggested other beings had passed through recently. The human's eyes scanned constantly, noting patterns and possibilities. His instincts told him that danger was approaching, and he prepared for it without alarming her. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made them both freeze. From the shadows emerged a group of scavengers, heavily armored and armed with advanced tools. Their movements were coordinated, purposeful, and clearly focused on finding something or someone. The human instinctively stepped in front of her, signaling for her to stay close. She pressed against him, her body tense, but he could feel her breathing steadying as he whispered reassurance. They could not fight directly. The scavengers were too many, too well equipped. Instead, the human guided her through a narrow path that twisted between thick trees and jagged rocks. He used the terrain to their advantage, moving quietly, deliberately, avoiding noise that could give them away. She followed every instruction, learning to move with the same caution and precision he used. The scavengers paused, scanning the area with sharp eyes and mechanical devices. One of them raised a scanning tool, sending out a faint pulse that swept over the forest floor. The human quickly covered the alien survivor with his body, shielding her from the pulse. They remained still, barely breathing, as the wave passed over them. The scanners moved on, and the scavengers continued down a different path, unaware that they had been so close. Once the danger had passed, they resumed their journey, moving even more cautiously than before. The forest began to thin, giving way to rocky hills and jagged cliffs. The terrain was rough, forcing them to climb and descend with care. He helped her over each obstacle, offering steady hands and support, while she began to anticipate his movements, following him more smoothly. They reached a narrow canyon as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The walls rose high on either side, casting long shadows and providing cover from aerial threats. He led her carefully through the canyon, aware that it could be a trap. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate, and he remained vigilant for any signs of danger. A sudden roar echoed through the canyon, shaking loose small stones from the walls. He froze, scanning the area. From behind a rock formation, a massive creature emerged. Its armored skin glinted in the fading sunlight and its eyes fixed on them. He instinctively moved in front of her, positioning himself between her and the creature. She pressed against him, but he could feel the determination in her body as well. She was ready to face this challenge alongside him. He studied the creature, noting its movements and patterns. It was curious, cautious, and powerful, but not immediately aggressive. He whispered instructions to her, and she followed, moving quietly with him. Step by step, they navigated around the creature, using rocks and shadows for cover. The creature followed at a distance, its attention divided, but it did not attack. By nightfall, they found a safe clearing near a small stream. He built a contained fire, careful to keep the glow low and avoid drawing attention. She sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the firelight, her body relaxed for the first time in hours. He shared a small meal, and she ate slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. She looked at him, her expression showing gratitude, relief, and a deep trust that had grown through their shared struggles. They slept in shifts, taking turns keeping watch. The forest around them was alive with sounds, some strange, some threatening, all a reminder of the world they were navigating. He stayed alert, listening to every rustle, every distant call, and every movement. She rested more fully now, her body recovering, but he remained vigilant. His eyes scanned the shadows, noting the flicker of movement, ready to act if necessary. The next morning, they continued their journey. The terrain grew more difficult, with steep cliffs and loose rocks threatening to slow them. He guided her carefully, offering support and instructions. She moved with increasing confidence, learning to navigate the dangerous landscape with his guidance. Every step strengthened their bond, a shared understanding that survival depended on their trust and cooperation. They came across a fallen transport vehicle, half buried in rubble. Its interior was dark, but he could see signs of recent activity, footprints, discarded tools, and faint traces of energy. He motioned for her to stay back while he investigated. The creatures nearby noticed him but did not approach, retreating silently. He returned to her, and together they moved on, careful to leave no trace behind. By midday, they reached a rocky plateau overlooking a wide valley. The view was breathtaking, with strange alien vegetation glowing faintly even in daylight. Despite the beauty, he remained cautious. The valley below could hold dangers, predators, scavengers, or unstable terrain. He guided her down a safe path, teaching her how to step carefully and use the environment for cover. She followed his instructions, moving with growing skill and confidence. As night approached, they found a shelter in a natural rock formation, providing protection from the elements and a vantage point to observe the valley. He built a fire using his equipment, keeping it small and contained. She watched him, her eyes reflecting curiosity and trust. He shared some food, and she ate slowly, appreciating both the sustenance and the safety he provided. They rested side by side, the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls of their shelter. The forest outside was alive with sounds, but they felt secure for the first time in days. He thought about their journey, the dangers they had faced, the trust that had grown between them, and the choices that had brought them here. His refusal to leave her when she was broken had created a bond stronger than either could have imagined. During the night, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Every rustle, every distant call was a reminder that danger could return at any moment. He kept one eye open, listening, watching, ready to act. She slept more soundly now, her body finally allowing itself to relax. He felt a deep sense of responsibility and connection, knowing that their survival depended on both of them, but also on the trust they shared. By the time the first light of dawn touched the valley, they were ready to continue. The human helped her to her feet, adjusting her pack and offering encouragement. She moved with confidence now, her trust in him complete. Together, they stepped into the unknown, facing a world of danger and uncertainty, but strengthened by their bond and the choices that had brought them together. Every step forward was a testament to resilience, courage, and the quiet power of humanity. He had found her, broken but breathing, and had refused to leave. That simple choice had shaped their journey, given them hope, and created a connection that would carry them through the challenges still ahead. They moved onward side by side, ready to face whatever the world would throw at them. Each day tested their skills, their trust, and their endurance, but with every challenge they grew stronger. The human's determination and her resilience were now intertwined, a partnership built not just on survival, but on respect, trust, and the unspoken promise that they would not abandon one another. The valley stretched before them, full of unknown dangers and hidden beauty. Together, they stepped forward, aware of the challenges but confident in their ability to meet them. The journey was far from over, but they had proven that even in a broken and hostile world, humanity's courage, intelligence, and compassion could create hope where none seemed possible. The valley stretched endlessly before them as the human and the alien survivor moved cautiously through the rocky terrain. The journey had pushed them both to their limits, physical exhaustion, hunger, and constant danger, but their bond had never been stronger. Every step was deliberate, measured, and filled with mutual trust. She no longer needed to cling to him for every movement. Her confidence had grown alongside her strength, but she still kept close, instinctively aware that they were stronger together. They were approaching a narrow pass between two cliffs when the faint hum of machinery reached their ears. The human froze, listening carefully. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate, scavengers approaching from the valley below. He scanned the landscape and saw their armored forms moving with precision. They were well armed, searching for survivors, and it was clear they had noticed signs of movement from the previous days. He lowered his voice, whispering instructions. "We move quietly, stay low, and follow me. We can avoid them if we are careful." She nodded, her eyes wide but resolute. She had learned to trust his instincts, and now she followed without hesitation, mirroring his movements as they slipped between rocks and shadows. The scavengers' patrols were thorough, but the humans' careful planning kept them hidden. They crouched behind boulders, waited for gaps in the patrols, and moved silently through narrow paths. Each step was a test of patience and focus. She began to anticipate his actions, adjusting her movements with increasing skill. Their cooperation was seamless, a silent understanding that allowed them to navigate danger together. As they neared the top of the pass, the scavengers seemed to split into smaller groups, moving in different directions. One group veered too close, and the human quickly pulled her behind a jagged rock formation. She pressed herself against him, and he could feel the tension in her body, the adrenaline coursing through both of them. He whispered softly, offering calm reassurance, and she exhaled slowly, regaining control. The pass opened into a plateau overlooking a vast expanse of forest and hills. The view was breathtaking, but he knew danger was still near. From their vantage point, he could see more scavengers approaching, their movements deliberate and organized. The human realized that they would not make it through without confrontation if the patrols discovered them. He scanned the terrain, looking for advantages. He spotted a narrow ridge leading to a partially collapsed cave system. It offered shelter and a potential escape route if needed. He guided her carefully, using the ridge for cover and moving silently. She followed closely, stepping lightly and mirroring his cautious pace. When they reached the cave entrance, they paused, catching their breath and assessing their surroundings. Inside the cave, the air was cool and still, a welcome relief from the tension outside. He set her down gently, giving her a chance to rest while he listened for the patrols. Outside, he could hear distant voices and the faint clatter of tools. The scavengers were thorough, but the cave's natural protection gave them a temporary advantage. He motioned for her to stay close and quietly explored deeper into the cave, finding a small chamber with enough space to rest safely. She sat beside him, her body relaxing as she took in the quiet and relative safety. He offered her water and a small meal, which she accepted with careful gratitude. She looked at him, her expression reflecting a mix of exhaustion and trust, and he understood that she now relied on him not just for survival, but as a companion who had chosen to stay when no one else would. They rested briefly before continuing deeper into the cave system. The passages twisted and turned, creating natural barriers that could hide them from the scavengers above. He led her through narrow corridors, over uneven ground, and past small drops, ensuring her safety with every movement. She followed closely, her confidence growing, her movements steady and deliberate. Suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the ground. The human froze, listening intently. The scavengers had discovered their trail, and the vibrations suggested they were closing in. He whispered to her, "We have to move fast. Stay close and follow me exactly." She nodded, gripping his arm briefly for reassurance. Together, they navigated the twisting passages, moving with precision and determination. The sound of pursuit grew louder. Scavengers were entering the cave system, their footsteps echoing through the corridors. The human led her to a narrow tunnel that opened into a larger chamber with several exits. He scanned the area quickly and chose a path that would allow them to exit undetected. She followed without hesitation, trusting his judgment completely. As they moved through the chamber, one of the scavengers appeared at a nearby exit, spotting them. The human acted instinctively, using a loose rock to create a distraction. The scavenger turned, giving them a brief window to escape through another passage. They ran, moving quickly but carefully, guided by his knowledge of the cave's layout and his understanding of timing and positioning. They emerged from the cave into a dense forest, the canopy above filtering the sunlight in dappled patterns. The scavengers were still searching, but the forest provided cover. He guided her through the trees, using natural obstacles to their advantage. She moved with agility now, her body strong and coordinated, following his lead flawlessly. Every step was a combination of caution and speed, and together they stayed ahead of the pursuers. After several hours of careful navigation, they reached a small river. The water was clear and fast-moving, a natural barrier that would slow any pursuers. He helped her across, ensuring she did not slip or fall. They paused on the opposite bank, catching their breath and drinking from the river. She looked at him with gratitude, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of trust and reliance. He smiled faintly, recognizing that their partnership had become unbreakable. The forest around them grew darker as evening approached. He knew they could not continue indefinitely without rest, and he searched for a safe place to sleep. They found a small clearing surrounded by thick trees and rocks, providing natural protection. He set up a small fire, careful to keep the light low, and she sat beside him, exhausted but alert. They ate a simple meal from their remaining supplies, and he spoke softly, sharing stories of other worlds he had visited, of humans who had faced impossible challenges and persevered. She listened intently, her body relaxed for the first time in days, her eyes reflecting the firelight. The human realized that she had begun to understand not just his words, but the meaning behind them, the courage, patience, and determination that had guided their journey. Night fell and the forest came alive with sounds, calls of unknown creatures, rustling leaves, and distant movements. He kept one eye open, vigilant, while she slept more deeply than she had in days. Her breathing was steady, her body finally allowing itself to recover from the constant danger. He felt a profound sense of responsibility and connection, knowing that their survival depended on both of them and the bond they had forged. As dawn broke, they prepared to move once again. The human helped her to her feet, adjusting her pack and offering encouragement. She moved with confidence now, her trust in him complete. Together, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges remained. Every step carried the weight of their shared experiences, the dangers they had overcome, and the trust that had grown between them. The terrain opened into a vast plain, dotted with strange alien vegetation and the ruins of distant settlements. From this vantage point, the human could see the path ahead, filled with both opportunity and risk. He guided her carefully, pointing out potential hazards and encouraging her to move with awareness. She followed without hesitation, her movements precise and deliberate. Suddenly, a group of scavengers appeared on the horizon, moving quickly toward them. The human assessed the situation and realized that confrontation was inevitable. He took a deep breath and whispered to her, "Stay close. Follow my lead. We can get through this together." She nodded, her eyes steady, and pressed herself against him as they prepared to face the threat. The scavengers approached, but the human's careful planning and strategic use of terrain gave them an advantage. They moved quickly, using rocks, fallen trees, and natural cover to avoid direct confrontation. She followed every instruction, anticipating his movements and acting in coordination. Together, they navigated the battlefield with precision, avoiding harm while keeping ahead of the pursuers. Finally, after a tense chase, they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a hidden valley. The scavengers hesitated, unwilling to follow into the unknown. The human led her carefully down a narrow path into the valley, a place of relative safety. She looked around in awe at the landscape, the beauty and tranquility a stark contrast to the danger they had endured. They rested at the edge of a small stream in the valley, drinking water and catching their breath. She looked at him with gratitude and trust, her expression reflecting the deep bond that had formed between them. He smiled faintly, recognizing that their journey had forged a partnership stronger than either had expected. As the sun set, they built a small fire and settled for the night. The valley was quiet, peaceful, and safe for the first time in their journey. He looked at her, noting the recovery in her posture, the steady rhythm of her breathing, and the sense of calm that had replaced fear. She had survived, grown stronger, and learned to trust him completely. The human realized that their journey had accomplished more than survival. It had created a bond, a connection, and a testament to the strength of humanity. Even in the most dangerous, abandoned, and hostile places, courage, empathy, and determination could shine. He had found her broken but breathing, and he had refused to leave. That choice had changed everything for her, for him, and for the possibility of hope in a world that had seemed lost. They slept side by side, the fire casting gentle shadows across the valley. The stars above reflected in the stream, and the quiet hum of the natural world surrounded them. They were safe together and ready for whatever the future might hold. Their journey had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but it had also been filled with moments of trust, courage, and resilience. As dawn approached, the human looked down at her sleeping form and made a silent promise. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would not abandon her. She was no longer just a survivor in need of rescue. She was his companion, his equal, and a testament to the strength that could emerge when trust, courage, and compassion guided every choice. The alien survivor stirred, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. She smiled faintly, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. He returned the smile, feeling the quiet satisfaction of knowing that they had survived, learned, and grown stronger together. The valley stretched before them, full of life, potential, and the promise of a future shaped by courage and trust. And so they moved forward, side by side, into the unknown. The dangers of the world were still present, but they had proven that together they could face anything. He had found her, broken but breathing, and had refused to leave. That simple choice had created hope, resilience, and a bond that would endure, a reminder that humanity's courage and compassion could shine even in the darkest places.